part of this event because I'm 17 years old, so I'm not eligible to vote yet. And I've been involved in the political sphere since I was about 12. And still sounds surprising to me when I say it, but it was one evening during the 2020 election, and I ended up phone banking for the Biden campaign, and now I'm still here. So it stuck with me. My vision of politics wasn't coming from a perspective of family and perspective of what my parents and further on up were telling me. It came from a deep passion and drive for making people better, making people feel better, making sure that everybody can have, like Becky said, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If everybody's not feeling happy and everybody's feeling down, alone, it's hard to be included as a community. My version of politics, like knocking doors, making campaign TikToks, helping my friends register to vote, and convincing adults that young people actually do care about the future, is not how many people explain their start in politics. Here's what I'm going to talk about today. Not how to fix Gen Z, because I don't think that any of us can fix our generation, but how we can better connect our generation to civics, to being engaged in our community, and to further, especially, we need people to vote. So I'm going to talk a lot about the civics and what we are doing as a government to promote civic education and making sure that people are learning at a younger age. And we'll kind of go into the different aspects and lenses that people will need to, how we can improve it based on certain aspects, such as like community and work and family type stuff, and then also government and education. So when I first got involved, I didn't get it either. I was part of the problem, I guess, that is still happening today, where I didn't understand what was going on, and I never really checked or cared to see, and it wasn't very easy for me to find answers, and that's what really got me to where I am now, is I had to go home one day and Google questions about the 2020 primary for an assignment that I had in history class. And upon doing that, I found, it was way later on in the primary process, I found Joe Biden's campaign was calling, registering voters and trying to get pledges for people to vote in primaries. And that was my first conversation with people, and that was the first thing that I was able to do to connect with somebody. And I even wrote my college application essay about this moment, because it was the first time that I really learned what a connection means and how it means to a broader community to be able to connect with each other. So I'm sure you guys have all faced, being not included at some point in your life, and as you guys all know from that, that doesn't feel good, that doesn't promote us to do more good, that makes us want to shelter and hide and, be antisocial further. So it was kind of strange to me when I got on the phone with a woman. It was one of the first phone calls that I had. A woman explained to me that she hasn't voted before and she doesn't plan on ever voting. And she could tell that I was definitely a younger person. And she asked me, what the heck are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you, what? I didn't really tell her I was 12, but I told her I couldn't vote. And I said that I want to make sure that people who do have the privilege to vote can do so, and that will impact everybody's life. And we talked for nearly an hour about her life and what the government was doing to impact her life, and most of it was not very good. And the reason behind that was because she wasn't totally aligned with what's out there, what voting can do, how do we get to a better future by caring about issues, and how do we go about caring about issues, getting change to happen. So that really shaped my, aha moment of, oh my gosh, this is like real important stuff in real life, because there's people growing up that don't think that voting will ever matter. It starts with families and parents. If they're not voting, it's scientifically proven that the child is less likely to vote, because most kids around this age are getting a lot of their information from their parents. But we'll talk about information and media type stuff in a bit. But civic participation isn't automatic. It's relational. People get involved because someone reaches out, someone connects, and someone says that you matter and that your opinion matters. Really connecting the dots that politics was about people more than it was political party. That was my moment where I really, really understood that I can do something even though I can't vote. And I wanted to do something because I wasn't able to vote, and I really wanted to be able to make a change or impact. So I believe that every single person of Gen Z deserves their own aha moment in their life. I feel like everybody who hasn't voted so far is not choosing to not vote because they purposefully hate voting. I think it's because we haven't had the experience or the motivation to realize that, wow, this actually impacts my life, which is why more people vote once they get to college and start doing their taxes and all that stuff on their own. And, pretty usual. But it's not just about telling younger folks that voting matters. We have to feel it. And I speak on behalf, I'm Gen Z. I have a pretty unique generation that I'm a part of. And it's quite difficult seeing some of the stuff that I see online and talking to friends and being around a community of people that are so disconnected from the world. And it frustrates me. And then I remember that it takes somebody to have their first aha moment to realize that, okay, this is politics. I can actually change this, and this is something that we can do. So I like to tell people at the start of any civic conversation, and when people say politics doesn't matter, I like to say politics is affecting you from the moment you wake up, the moment you step foot outside, the moment you walk down the street, the moment you get in the car and drive, the moment you get to school, the moment you go home, the moment you eat food, especially at lunch. There's always a political connection to something. And I feel like the word political and the word civic kind of gets mixed around, because everybody can easily say, well, that's too political, I'm not getting into that. When really there's such a big need for us to talk about civics and why it's important to just be involved, despite the polarization. And outside of that, just speaking about the issues that impact us. Our generation, Gen Z's generation, is a little bit unique to the fact that we've grown up in a completely digital age. It's a very challenging scenario to be in when I'm, trying to communicate more and trying to connect with people. And, it's always text messages and Snapchats that are only there for 30 seconds or whatever, and then you can't see them anymore. So it's difficult, and there's a lot of challenges that come with that. Shorter attention spans. You've probably heard of the Gen Z stare, maybe some of you. That was on the news a couple months ago, and I had all sorts of people asking me, what's the Gen Z stare? And it's people zoning out and not listening and just kind of just sitting there and nodding their head. So, some of my conversations have led to that too, and it's not much that I can do about it, but I have confidence that when they realize their first moment, they will then realize, oh my gosh, what Kasen was telling me was important, and I should probably be listening to what this is and figuring it out. So, speaking about Gen Z as a generation, we are a very widespread age range in the way of Gen Z really goes from anybody, it's probably changed now, but 30-ish to anybody born 30 to 14, 15, so around that age. And as you can imagine, we've all grown up in such a different age group, even within our own generation. People who are in their 30s didn't grow up when there were iPhones and iPads every year and computers that they would actively use every single day. Whereas I, born in 2008, was kind of fully into a fully digital world. And so there's disconnect even within our own generation. And I think that's important to highlight because everything I say, I'm not, I can't speak 100% on behalf of Gen Z, but I do want to make sure that, I do want to say that everything I talk about today is very real and it's based on hundreds of conversations that I've had with my own peers, people out in the community. And so I feel like I've at least got some authority to speak on behalf of some of us. So thinking about our generation again, we've grown up in constant crisis. We've had a pandemic, we had the lockdown, we've experienced shootings, climate disasters, online drama, and political chaos. So it doesn't really surprise me why young people want nothing to do with all of this, especially when they can go on their phone and get on TikTok and start scrolling and whatever dopamine that releases in your brain. So there are real priorities that our generation has, and none of it starts with the pandemic, lockdown, shootings, climate disasters, online drama, political chaos. So it's expected that the world that we all live in is not what they want to live in. So it's really about the transition that we're going to make of how do we make this current state of the world into a state where the new people are ready to lead and take over, because it might seem that our generation is not ready to lead and take over, and I would 99.99% agree with you. I think we're at such a drastic difference of who we are versus what the world is and what we want to see. And I think really highlighting on the pandemic part, it was my 6th grade that I got cut off, and then my entire 7th grade was online or virtual. We tried doing remote, hybrid, and that never worked. And then 8th grade was kind of affected by that too. So that was my middle school year, and it's quite crazy to me to know that there are kids now in my middle school building, our middle school and high school is connected, that were pre-kindergarten pandemic people, students. So there's people now, it's hard to think about, but there's people that were born into the pandemic that are now in our society, and they don't know anything other than the social isolation that we've had for the past 5-6 years now. So if you can imagine how your life has changed from 2020 and beyond, imagine how somebody else's life is strictly living in that time period. I think a big part of that is mental health and talking about the mental health of students, and especially Gen Z. It's a key issue that I think a lot of people, we hear about mental health more, and we're more accepting as a community to mental health causes. But it's something that we are taking charge in and making sure that we are acting appropriately about. So that's why when you talk about young people, you see the highest rates of therapy in younger people, specifically in this generation. We see huge discussions in government about funding and mental health counseling and how we can slash this, and sometimes how we can take money from schools and put it to the roads. It's a very, very important issue because I would argue without having a proper mental health situation, you can't really be yourself, and you can't really go on to do the things that you need to do. And I think everybody here has had one of those days or periods of times where it's a little bit difficult to carry on. So the mental health thing is a really big aspect of what is important to our generation and what we need to better help get acclimated into society, which I know sounds weird, but the next big thing is the money kind of things that we're dealing with. And so it's sad almost a year ago today, we as a society did something very heartbreaking by electing our current president. And to think specifically on that, it was about the money, and it was really hard to see young people my age fully supporting that mess. But at the end of the day, I can realize where the money situation comes from. So now, with the housing pricing being so crazy, with the cost of tuition being crazy, for out-of-state students going to Michigan State, the first year of tuition can be $54,000, that might surprise you if you don't have kids and stuff going through that right now. So if you think about it, you pay, you put yourself in $50-some thousand of debt per year to get a career, to get a degree, and then to go further, then it's like, okay, now I have to get a job, but there's no jobs out there, and people can't find jobs, and where are they going to live? Who are they going to live with? It's more about, I've met so many people who are roommates in more weird situations where it's like these are grown people who just simply can't afford the cost of living, and that's such a big deal that I think is happening, especially in the Grand Rapids area, where all of the land in Kent County is owned by, certain few families, and they get to really decide where things go, how much things cost, and so that's really a big, it's just a big shocker in my mind to have to explain that to people at such a young age, and I feel like it's something that, that's, something we would normally deal with way down the line, but kids can't even get past the end of their education before realizing what they're going to do with their life and how far we're going to go with their life. So further, there's climate issues, which I know everybody's worried about, but the climate issues for our generation are going to really be what impacts us the most throughout our lifetime. We always hear things about carbon emission free by 2030, or, getting rid of plastics by X year. And the reality of that is some of the people who are leading right now, who are enacting these policies, who are deciding what's happening, they're not going to be here those years when it's our turn to have to deal with all of it. So it's always funny seeing 90-some-year-old people in Congress yelling and arguing about climate like they have something to say about it, which, yeah. So I spoke a little bit about belonging, but we want to feel a part of something, and I think that's a big aspect of it. We don't want to feel part of the political world as in, like, I have to figure out what's going on and why Trump is arguing with this person and why there's a new tariff on, shoes or whatever it might be that day. We want to be a part of a community, and it's our opportunity now to grow into a community, and that's where we're going to get to the next stage of our life and get to a more normalized society. And so that comes from a spot of, where civic engagement borders and where our community starts. So I would argue that really realizing where civic engagement ends and where community starts it's like a T. If you're not civically engaged, it's very difficult to be a part of a community and feel seen and feel happy and feel like you want to join a community, to be a part of something. So it's like a generation change of force to navigate chaos and information overload every day, and we still need to learn how to manage to care for one another. So I would say that there's a lot of people in Gen Z who are very centered around, I just have to survive now. There's a lot going on. I can't buy a house. I don't have a job. I can't afford groceries. Now there's no benefits, like SNAP is cut, Medicare, Medicaid cut. People are very much in their their, defend for themselves kind of situation, and making sure that they are okay before caring about others, which is important, yes, but we also have to realize that we need to care about one another in order to make change and make an impact. So I've seen firsthand these kind of challenges come up, and watching people understand, in my generation, watching them understand these issues and seeing that moment click in their head. And that's been so inspiring to me, and I do want to take some time to talk about that. But if anybody knows about Forest Hills and Lowell and kind of some issues that pop up with school districts and libraries and in books, which is so timely because you're speaking about, your next meeting is about book banning. But the first time this whole book banning thing was brought up in Forest Hills, there were a number of students there, and it was so fulfilling to me realizing that these people cared so much about these books that they did not want banned, and arguably these books that are so important to curriculum. And that was their moment of, oh my gosh, like I can do something. I can go speak at a board meeting. I can go make sure that people who are enacting these changes in my life know how I feel about it or how students feel about it. And unfortunately, to this day, I'm the only student who goes to every single board meeting in my district, which is kind of fun because I get to, meet all the school board people and have some inside predictions about snow days and stuff. But,
Can I ask what high school you go to?
Forest Hills Eastern.
Okay.
Forest Hills Eastern. Sorry, I forgot
My
that.
girls went to Northern, so.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the board meetings where they got really out of hand.
Oh, yeah.
With a lot of people coming and.
Yep.
crazies
Yeah.
coming.
That's another part of it, is this whole crazy polarization aspect of it does not feel inviting to people, and people want nothing to do with it. And unfortunately, the further we move away from wanting anything to do with it, the more crazy it's going to get, because those people are going to have the most voices at the table, be the most involved. They're going to have the majority of decision making if they're the ones that are only in charge. So thank you. That was a good question. It reminded me of that. But when people realize that the decisions that are affecting them aren't untouchable, that's like the biggest kind of light bulb moment. And I think for everybody, you don't know anything, you don't realize how things are until you experience it firsthand. So really breaking away from the polarization world of politics and what's happening in politics, and realizing that there is such a big human aspect, and that's what's most important, is the human aspect, because that is what's going to influence us every day. That is what is going to make everybody feel like, okay, I gotta go vote, I gotta go do this. This is good for society, this is good for me, this is good, and so obviously we haven't seen that in the last year, but we're moving closer to it every day. So when we talk about engaging Gen Z, it's hard for me to hear people say, okay, go vote, go do it. And the reason I say that is because A, I'm surrounded by people my age who can vote, and I have gone around my high school getting people to register to vote and to sign up to volunteer and to pledge to vote for candidates, that kind of stuff. But when we're engaging in Gen Z, that kind of go vote action word doesn't mean much to us, and especially if you haven't voted before, it seems more of like a scary type word of like, oh, you got to go vote. And I think for people who haven't grown up with going to the polls with their parents, nobody can even imagine what it looks like, and you'd be surprised how many people are scared of that first initial moment of walking in and not knowing what to do. And so I've had to draw maps. I'm an election worker too, so I'm very, active, and I know what the poll setup looks like, so I'm not really worried. But I've had to draw maps, like this is what you're gonna go do first. You're gonna check in with this person, then you're gonna go to the computer, then you're gonna get your ballot, then you're gonna vote, and you're gonna go put it in the tabulator. And it's really interesting to have that aspect of knowledge, especially when everybody around me doesn't. So There are usually three ways in which people in my generation get to their aha moment. And it follows kind of this three-plan step. First is a personal issue someone already cares about. So maybe it's not enough funding for Medicaid or for healthcare, and you're not able to. You as a student are now forced to carry the burden of financial duties in your household, because not only can your parents not afford the healthcare situation, but now you're working a job outside of going to school in order to have benefits to cover yourself or to cover your family. An emotional experience makes it feel real, which I know we talk about in a way of people aren't going to get this whole, we could apply that to a lot of things, but the immigration type stuff, people aren't going to feel affected by it until they are affected, and then they're going to be super empowered by it. And then they're going to feel like, oh my gosh, I see this now, I see what's happening. And I know that feels hard to say, we need a bad thing to happen to you first in order for you to understand how it feels. But I think for most scenarios in life, that's how it goes. You learn a lot by doing the wrong thing, and then the whole rest of your life you do the right thing. And then last is the path for action, and making it and realizing that it feels possible for people. So I've got a couple examples of some times of when I've realized this in my community, but a student who cares about mental health services or really benefits from the mental health services offered at school, and they realize that the school budget is the deciding factor of how many counselors go to each school. So I'm on a student advisory council, and there's one school, for the whole state of Michigan, I'm on the MDE, Michigan Department of Education Student Advisory Council. And there's people from very rural schools who are sitting there like, yeah, we have like one counselor, and it's very hard to get in touch with them, and it's very hard to use them as a mental health kind of connection. And so then the burden is on me to find another provider outside, but how do I communicate that? And it just kind of spirals from there. But when I've talked to these people about realizing, hey, this is impacted right now by the people across the street when I'm in Lansing, when they realize how many, that single budget item affects how many counselors that their school will receive, then they care a lot more about it than thinking there's some whole government scheme of like there's no way to enforce it and that kind of stuff. Another thing is a young climate activist learns about a city council zoning controls for new renewable energy, which I think we've all experienced in Kent County, and we're kind of moving towards wanting more renewable energy. But if, when people realize that, oh, the city's going to be building Home Depot on the back of my yard, what am I going to go do about it? Well, you could go to the city council and talk to the zoning committee. And next, I'd say a TikTok creator fighting misinformation realized that media literacy is part of an education policy. So there's all of these kind of aspects that pertain to each individual's life and each person deals with every day, but it's really about how do we connect that and make them realize, okay, there's something that we can do about it. It's not just a scary, terrible thing for the future. So the transformation we're talking about is more like passive frustration to active ownership. How can we turn in the lesson we learned? How can we act upon it now? And once it clicks, it doesn't unclick. And I can tell you that based on my own experience. I can tell you that based on the experience of others, based on peers, friends. And it's really, it's hard to believe that just one little moment like that can ignite such a big idea. But I'll give an example of somebody who I am friends with who wasn't politically involved or didn't really care about politics and said, politics doesn't affect me, I don't care, let's just not talk about politics. And I said to them, okay, but one day there's going to be a point where you realize like it does and such. And they were complaining about cell phone policy at my school. We have a policy where we can't be on our cell phones. Cell phones are banned in the school. And so students feel very passionate for those issues. I love cell phone bans because I think it really helps us connect as a community. But they realized that the school board is the people who are enacting that, not the government way up some far long way. It's people right there that you can go impact. And I'll give another example to somebody who maybe I would say isn't connected or hasn't had their moment yet. I've seen them reposting videos about them on a rowboat going to China to get a new sweatshirt because it's so expensive now. They're like, I'll just go get it myself without the tariffs. So, there's a level of like, okay, you're almost there, but let's just connect the dots, right? So the first time that you testify at a meeting, the first time that you register to vote, the first time you see a candidate win who you elected, that changes you, and that changes you for the rest of your life. It doesn't unclick. You stop seeing voting as a chore, and you start seeing it more as a power move. And this is hard to talk about, but specifically with gun violence in our communities, I think it's not talked about enough, especially with older generations, because I don't think that we as a younger generation are communicating, this is what's happening in the school building, this is what we're doing as drills. And I know for some people that I know, they didn't grow up having active shooter drills in school. And now, when we have a fire drill, we don't immediately evacuate the school. Which I know would be like, there's a fire, the fire alarm's going off, whatever, but we stay in lockdown right away as we go to the lockdown state, and we ensure that there is a active fire threat, and we have to do that before either evacuating or staying. And that's such a huge shift from everything that we've ever known in our entire life and everything everybody else has grown up doing. It's like you hear a fire alarm, you do everything you can to get away from it, not stay right there and pray and hope that things are okay. So we've had a really strong sense of empowerment behind that, but it's also a conversation where we're not the younger people that are the ones owning firearms, and we're not the ones mishandling firearms, first because we can't, and second, when we see these cases, when things happen by young, when criminals happen to be younger, it's always from the parent or from a parent who didn't lock things up properly, which is why we're so blessed in Michigan to have red flag laws, safe storage acts, and could go on and on about the rest of that. But we're very safe in the state of Michigan, and we've learned from the actions that have happened in Oxford, that have happened at Michigan State, that have happened all over the country. So it's something that we have learned is a very dark and hard part of society and the world that we live in. But we're starting to realize that if we're not engaged and involved, there's no way that we can fix it without thinking about it and trying to fix it. So the question kind of begins to form as, how do we help this kind of thing more than just saying go vote? And that is super important, because I can speak on experience as to hearing go vote, go vote, go vote sounds like your mom saying clean your room, clean your room, clean your room, right? Like it's just, it automatically goes, I'll do it later, or I'll do it later, and then never happens. So how do we turn that level of curiosity and passion for certain items into the action and confidence that people need to go out there and vote? So I've talked a little bit about things that Gen Z experiences and in a positive regard, but in a negative regard, I'd say the way that we operate and the way that we think, and like I said, digital world, everything is so different in our heads. So hearing things from the older generation of folks like, it's so important for you to vote, it's so important for you to vote. It's true, right? And it applies to the people who are understanding it, But to those who aren't connected or engaged at all, they're not going to understand and they're not really going to listen. So the big idea is, how do we connect people to be saying the right things when we're talking to young folks? And how do we really engage people at a younger level so that we see an increase in youth turnout? We see an increase in this generation voting. And I like to say to people every single day, more and more Gen Z adults are eligible to vote every single day. And over the next couple election times, the electorate is completely shifting. So it's important that we're not only adapting as a community to fit the younger generation's needs, but also making sure that the materials and resources are there so that we don't have a situation where there's like a 10% voter turnout in an election just because people don't want to think about it or whatever. So another kind of aspect of that is dealing with the procrastination of the young age and the kind of work ethic of the younger age. There's a drastic level of what was expected in school, 50 years ago, even 10 years ago, I'd argue too, and what's happening in school now. And so things have shaped so far away from math, science, reading, writing as to what they are, because the issues in our society have changed from math, science, reading, writing. There's so many more things beyond that that matters. And so when we talk about education, it's important that we're not just glimpsing over the civic education part that we need. And I've been working hard to get with the state of, the Department of Education, the state of Michigan, how do we expand the curriculum requirements? And how do we make sure that people aren't taking this class freshman year and they're taking it maybe their senior year when they're more closer to vote? Why aren't there situations like voter registration links that are mandatory to be sent out to students taking civics classes? Or, which ways can we better fund these programs to make sure that these children are going through education that will teach them that they want to be engaged, not that they have to be engaged or that it's a burden onto them to be engaged. So I want to bring you guys into the conversation a little bit, and I want to hear about some ways in which you have personally experienced talking to younger voters, what you have found, what you have come to in your mind to the decision, like what are you going to do the next time you talk to a young person about voting? So I'd love to take a couple minutes, like 10 minutes to have you guys talk in groups and kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and we can really go through this as a community, because like I said, it's difficult to do everything alone, and it's not going to get you anywhere when there's one person that can impact 5 people and another person doing something completely different impacting way more. So if you guys, I know I don't have my slides, so I'm a little disorganized, but if you guys want to get into like groups of, I think 3 or 4.
Let me just jump
Yeah.
in. So pick 4 or 5 people who are seated by you, pull your chairs together, and see what ideas you can come up with. I mean, there is a lot of experience in this room. I see some older folks, some younger folks. Think about what we've heard from Kasen about the challenges that are facing this generation, but what are the opportunities for them too? And let's put some of our thinking together. So maybe take about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Start pulling the chairs together, folks, and have some discussion about this. Like, what can
For the Gen Z is climate change, or the environment as a whole. We were wondering, it's more of a question than an idea to pitch, how do you think that we can address that with Gen Zers? Because that's their future, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that our generations have given you a lousy bill, but
It is what it is,
it
right?
is what it is. So,
That's a very, very important question, but I think what what is happening is we've grown up hearing climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, and that doesn't even mean anything to somebody now. And so what does mean something to them is like in the short term, like how do they experience it right away? Like, why is it 85 degrees in October? You know, addressing it from that kind of perspective of, okay, maybe it's not something we're thinking about in such a large scale right now, but in our own communities, this is happening and this is why it's important to talk about. I think I've talked to so many people who are like, why is it 85 degrees in October? And it was for the Progressives in the Park event, and we were all so hot there. And so.
But a big difference between weather and climate, and how do we get that?
Correct.
For, you know, that, I think so many people vote for now, vote for today, vote for my pocket,
Correct.
vote for what's happening now. How do we instill in Gen Z that we're voting for 10 years and 20 years and 100 years even down if we're still, the planet's still around?
Yeah, it is a hard question, but I definitely say the aspect of that immediate kind of realization is important for that.
All right, who's next? Gonna pass that?
Let's go to this
Right here.
group here.
Okay, don't laugh. But we were talking about, you know, remember the days when we used to sit around the kitchen table and just our parents would talk to us and we'd all get to know each other well and talk about issues, and maybe that formed our opinions to who we are today. What about starting a network of dinner with grandma and grandpa? And you set up a network of volunteer middle-aged ladies or men who choose a location or their own home and just start inviting somehow groups of kids, teenagers who love your cooking, and get them to come and cook, and you just start talking and you just say, what are you mad about today? What's on your mind, kids? And then you can guide them. You can steer those conversations to constructive solutions or sharing of thoughts and maybe even civics.
What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I spoke about that a bit in one of the groups I stopped by. So it's a very good idea and very good thought. I think that is incredibly valuable and reasonable to want to happen, and especially because, you know, time is so limited, and I say that as I've lost 3 of my grandparents. So time is limited with people in that regard, and I think if people aren't understanding that from the older generations, who's going to be there to tell them, you got to care about the climate, you got to care about, you know, these issues that matter to you. So I think I just was talking about them pairing younger people up with grandparents. But the hard thing about Gen Z is getting somebody to want to do that, and I think what would be good is using the incentive of volunteer hours, if you can pitch it as like a research type study for National Honor Society. Yeah, so if there's some way to pitch that as like a, yeah,
Okay,
right.
who's your spokesperson
Yeah.
here? Okay, speak loudly so everybody can.
Okay. So we talked about kind of like tackling that isolation that a lot of Gen Z feels, and trying to make it known that these things are a lot more accessible. So I guess one of our main ideas was maybe at these next upcoming protests, we kind of encourage talking amongst ourselves more. I mean, speaking from personal experiences, I feel like when I was there, I was just kind of talking to my friends, and you know, we don't really meet a lot of new people, and I think that we can really use that protest as a chance to get to know everyone more and like meet our like-minded neighbors and really start forming a community. And then we can get things like this out there more, so like more people my age are like knowing this is going on, knowing, hey, I just gotta like show up here and I'm already putting in work. And so that was kind of our main thing we talked about, is making these things more known and kind of just driving for that more community and trying to get away that isolation.
Do you think the locations of the protests are amenable to younger people coming? Like the overpasses, or how do you find, how do we get the word out to them where they are?
Yeah, I think it's frustrating because a lot of people my age, their primary news source is TikTok.
Yep.
I mean, to be blunt. And TikTok is global. I mean, it's hard to get local stuff on there.
Is Indivisible on TikTok?
Yeah. So I mean, like, quite frankly, like we need some TikTokers here, I guess, really to start kind of being more political activist and getting more of a local scene going, and that can get the word out. Because I feel like the locations are fine. I mean, you've got Grand Valley like right there. Those students can walk right over to those protests if they wanted to.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Thank you.
I agree.
All right, let's
Thank you.
go back here. Okay, who's speaking? There we go. And talk loudly, because this is just going into the recording,
Okay.
so we want everybody to be able to hear you.
So I think this is probably more in the form of a question as well, but or sort of the germ of an idea. But we wondered if mail-in ballots would be more comfortable for Gen Zers. So instead of just saying "go vote," saying something along the lines of "Would you like to know how you can vote by mail?" And because a lot of, even myself, I prefer to vote by mail. I like to take the time to think about what's this issue I didn't know about, so on and so forth. That might relieve some of the anxiety around a new situation and what could be on the ballot.
Yeah.
So
Because if you've got something coming in the mail for you, it's kind of hard to ignore it, right?
Right.
It's hard to forget when the election is, or you've got something right in front of you that's been there it comes 4-ish weeks. 40 days ahead. Yeah. So I agree. I'm not sure how many of you guys know this, but when you're 16 and you have a driver's license or state ID, there's a program that it's like there's an opt-out program now to pre-register you to vote. So automatically you will be pre-registered to vote unless you click I do not want to be pre-registered to vote. So typically voter registration isn't an issue, which I know we see a lot of attempts to get people registered, which is important. It's incredibly important because it's the number one, barrier, I guess. But we also need to kind of adapt with, you can register to vote on election day in our state. You can find your polling place online. You can call a number and they'll tell you where to go. So it's really about, like you said, pre-registration is great, but at the same time, if you're not looking out for anything, you're not going to get a letter in the mail that says, congrats, you're actually registered now, besides maybe getting a voter card. And this is, I will say this, the number of people that are young that come into an election office, I think you guys all gotten the postcards before, right? It says your precinct, your districts and stuff. The people that bring that in and show it as a form of identity, so high, through the roofs. And people like my friends are like, okay, yeah, I'll bring my thing. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Type the address into your phone. But yeah, so it's about we have these opportunities and materials and we're doing the right things, but how do we adapt them to be more understanding to a different generation, or how do we get a newer generation to understand it? But I agree. I think if everybody got a ballot in the mail and knew, then nobody has to think about when the next election is, and nobody has to wonder, is there an election? Do I have to vote? That kind of thing.
Instead of encouraging them at whatever point they're able to sign up for the mail
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, especially around the college age. I mean, you can do it from wherever and still be registered at home. So
When they're registered to vote, are they registered to get the vote by mail as well?
no,
No, they have to ask for that.
no, you have to sign up for that. But it is very easy. It's for those of you who have done it, it's very simple.
We probably all have.
Okay, do we have an idea in here? Who's pitching?
Mentoring.
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 Okay.
Having some kind of relationship between a young person who's interested in talking to people who are in IGGR and want to tell us what they think and vice versa. So not to feel like we're the superior.
We learn from each other.
We learn from each other.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I think it's like what was mentioned earlier. I think it's incredibly important to build the bridges and bonds between generations too. It's not generation against generation. We're all here together, and we need to know how to operate together and how to share the space together, because the way that Gen Z might dream about the government running and things happening is not realistic to anybody else. It'd be great if pizza was free on Friday every single day, no matter where it was, right? And all that stuff. Or you get the new iPhone for free every year, right? But we also need to realize, the connection between, and make sure we have a connection between the generations too. So,
All right, last idea.
Okay, I'm not sure this is working, but you're right here. So we talked about engaging and mobilizing college, I don't think it's working.
it's for the
Oh,
recording.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Colleges, there's a lot of colleges in this town, and I don't know that the tables and tents that we set up and our things are especially geared toward that. But also connecting with what you said about growing up in a digital environment. I'm not a TikToker, but it seems like
Yeah.
should that be what we're focusing on? I don't think our flyers are going to be that effective if we post them up in a college, but I don't know because
Yeah.
I'm not in that arena.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a thought is, because we've had, I work Kid County Dems, we've had like the Aquinas Dems. They come, we have quite a few of them that have come to our events and stuff, and I think like reaching out, like your organization maybe should reach out to like GVSU, Young Dems, all those Young Dem, you know what I mean? That's a start. So maybe reach out to some of those different Young Dem clubs that are out there at those universities and college. GRCC, I think, has a Young Dems group also.
Yeah.
That might be an idea
would-
for Indivisible to say, hey, we're whatever you're gonna do, you know,
Yeah.
do the pitch to those guys.
So
Just
those
a thought.
groups still exist?
Oh, they do
Yeah,
exist. Oh, yeah.
and they're building.
actually-
They're coming
Yeah.
straight back up.
Okay, that
So,
would be a good connection.
yeah, and what I was going to say, it goes hand in hand. The easiest way to get people to understand something or find out about something is by their peers, especially in our generation. So, I'd probably say 50 times 50 times more likely to do something or attend something if a friend tells them, or even somebody their age tells them, compared to, what an uncle might tell them, or, So, really getting into, I'd say, infiltrating the campus, really finding one person who is very social and understands how important things are, who can then spread the word and go outwards. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to finish up? You have any last closing comments you want to make?
Yeah. I just want to say thank you for attending. I'm really appreciative to have had the chance to talk to you guys, and I hope there's some younger folks here, so I hope what I said was accurate enough. Yeah, I'm getting some head nods, so that's good. But I definitely want to applaud you guys for being here, because it is such an important thing to get the next generation of students ready. And it's vital to our up and coming. So if you guys have questions, concerns, issues, or ideas, I'd love to be in touch and contact you. I'll say my email out loud. I'm Kasen Wooters, so my last name is WOOTERS, then KASEN @gmail.com. So if anybody wants to, yeah. Thank you.